Fall Out Boy's just never been about goals or anything. It's just not really our thing. So like it's just a snowball that kind of just became bigger and bigger. We never really had a plan to go anywhere.
Punk rock is big business. It's an undeniable fact. Green Day are one of the biggest bands in the world, while original legends like the Ramones and the Sex Pistols are worth millions in merchandising alone. Punk songs, soundtrack adverts for trainers and soft drinks, and punk icons like Iggy Pop are the subject of major film documentaries and serious academic appraisals. The music that once set out to destroy rock and roll is now firmly part of the establishment, and the scene that once screamed "no future" is more active and successful 30 years on than ever. But behind the sales figures, there's another story of a thriving international underground scene that's self-sufficient and largely independent from the mainstream music industry. A scene that remains true to its key principles of not selling out or compromising its integrity, where bands are judged on the quality of their music and their commitment to the cause, rather than on how many records they've sold. Every so often, however, a band crosses over from the punk underground to the million-dollar mainstream. Nirvana were one such example. Green Day, arguably, were another. And now Fall Out Boy looks set to follow in their footsteps. When they formed in 2001, the four members of Fall Out Boy, singer and guitarist Patrick Stump, bassist and lyricist Peter Wentz, guitarist Joe Troman, and drummer Andy Hurley, all had a long history as part of the Chicago hardcore scene, despite still all being in their teens or early 20s. Hurley and Wentz in particular had played in two of the scene's key bands, Race Traitor and Arma Angelus. But all four had grown up as part of a musical community with no stars and no pecking order, just a network of clubs, bands, friends and zines, and a bunch of kids dedicated to self-expression and in open rebellion against authority and the average American way of life. It's these roots that set Fall Out Boy apart from most of the other so-called pop-punk bands that every so often explode briefly and brightly across the international media. Although they initially formed as a rejection of the self-imposed limitations of the hardcore punk scene, main songwriter Peter Wentz now feels that Fall Out Boy incorporate more hardcore than they ignore. And while their musical aggression may be tempered slightly by catchy melodies and a self-deprecating sense of humour, their background has instilled them with certain values that they have no intention of shedding. Selling out is when you do something for money or exposure that you wouldn't do otherwise. Pete Wentz told the internet-based fanzine All Ages, "It's when you compromise yourself in order to get big." It perhaps says more about the times we live in than the band themselves that Fall Out Boy are as well known for refusing to license their music for an advert as for their actual songs and shows. But it's just one more example of the integrity with which the band attempt to conduct themselves in the face of increasing pressure to conform to expectations. It's a fine line for any band to tread, attempting to reach as many people as possible and to earn a living from your music, while at the same time staying true to what you believe in, while all around you seem to have no such compunction. At the end of the day, it's all about the music, writing songs that connect with people, that hopefully affect their lives for the better, and playing shows that inspire the kids there to go out and form bands of their own, or to pursue whatever dreams they hold closest to their hearts. For Fall Out Boy, it's not about the money or the fame. It's about playing to the fans, having fun, and spreading the word. In that sense, no matter how big they get, Fall Out Boy will always be punk rock to the core.
Started kind of by accident because
Well, like I was like kind of like doing this weird band. I asked Pete to be in it with me, and then we decided that the band sucked and that we wanted to do something that wasn't heavy. We were just doing heavy bands and we were sick of it, so we wanted to do something that was just in a completely different genre.
Peter Lewis Kingston Wentz was born on June the 5th, 1979, in the Chicago suburb of Wilmette. The son of a law professor, he attended first New Trier High School and then North Shore County Day School, and earned a reputation as an all-state soccer player. After school, he went on to study political science at Chicago's DePaul University, but dropped out one semester before graduation to pursue his punk rock dream full-time. Punk rock, and hardcore specifically, has always been the soundtrack, the inspiration and the guiding light in Pete's life. He was first turned on to punk by hearing the band Minor Threat, and soon immersed himself in Chicago's burgeoning underground scene throughout the 90s. Pete loved the energy of punk and started going to local all-age concerts as soon as he could. It seemed dangerous, yet at the same time totally accessible. There was no distinction between the people on stage and the people in the audience, and the music wasn't about technical virtuosity or posing. Anyone could do it. Anyone could be part of the scene or be in a band, and no one was more important than anybody else. From his early teens, Pete was performing in hardcore punk bands of his own. These included Firstborn, Yellow Road Priest, Seven Angels of the Apocalypse, and Culture of Violence, which is where he first met Milwaukee-born drummer Andrew John Hurley. Hurley was a year younger than Wentz and had moved to Chicago with his family as a teenager, although not before cutting his teeth playing in the Milwaukee hardcore bands Global Scam and Kill the Monkey Friends. After going through a period of heavy drinking and getting into trouble in his early teens, Andy was inspired by the hardcore punk ethic to go vegan and straight edge, a term describing punk kids who abstain from drugs, alcohol and animal products. After Culture of Violence, Andy and Pete both joined bands that went on to some considerable success within the hardcore scene. Andy in Race Traitor, and Pete first in Extinction, and then Arma Angelus, in which he was the lead singer. Arma Angelus were actually formed from the ashes of Extinction and Race Traitor, and according to their official biography, their goal was to express their disgust with humanity in general. Arma Angelus released 3 albums of dark, angst-ridden punk metal on small independent labels, while Andy went on to play in Project Rocket and Kill Pill, who both achieved some degree of recognition. Pete, however, was gradually becoming burned out by the repetitive nature of the hardcore scene, and was growing tired of the extreme politics, cliquey infighting, and the macho, restrictive nature of much hardcore music. There seemed to be so many rules as to what you could and couldn't do, and while he still believed in the essential principles of the scene, he yearned for a time when punk rock could mean more than just raging mosh pit anthems, a time when it didn't take itself so seriously. A time when punk rock meant self-expression in the broadest sense, not just an outpouring of the same kind of politically correct, smash-the-system anger, and when the music could be catchy and melodic, as well as energetic and abrasive. Above all, he yearned for a time when music could be fun again. Wentz had grown up listening to and being inspired by groups such as Green Day and The Descendants, whose music, while capable of expressing anger, sadness and insecurity, was essentially all about having fun. Pete's all-time favourite group, however, were Lifetime. This New Jersey band tore up the rulebook of what punk rock was meant to be about in the early 90s, rejecting the strict hardcore blueprint for a more melodic, emotionally driven sound that emphasised positive personal themes without sacrificing the energy and aggression of classic punk. As such, they were one of the key originators of the sound that would become known as emo, and a major influence on later bands such as Saves the Day and Taking Back Sunday. Although they never achieved much in the way of commercial success, they left behind 3 albums and a handful of singles that would change the direction of the US musical underground forever. In 2000, Pete hooked up with 16-year-old Joe Troman, a budding guitarist who shared Pete's love of energetic, musically expressive punk uncomplicated by scene politics and interband wrangling. The two started playing songs together in Pete's basement during breaks from his recording and gigging schedule with Arma Angelus. It was a great way to relax and have fun after the heavy angst and serious intentions of his main band, and Pete increasingly found he was more inspired by his little side project with Joe than he was by Arma Angelus. The pair began writing their own songs and playing them with Joe on guitar and Pete on bass and vocals, sometimes accompanied by any number of friends who might drop in the basement to play along on drums. But it was still just a bit of fun, a bit of a joke almost, a way to blow off steam and relax, and for the pair to entertain themselves. They never even thought they'd ever be playing out to an audience, let alone that the band would become so popular that it would turn into a full-time occupation.
We kind of like started going about doing this band, kind of taking it as a joke. I met Patrick by mistake at a Borders. And then me and Pete went over to his house one day and he played us a bunch of Saves the Day songs on acoustic guitar, and he sang, and it was really awesome. And we met Andy. We got Andy from Stork.
Joe Troman first met Patrick Martin Stump in a Borders bookstore. Joe was talking loudly about the doom metal band Neurosis to his friends when Patrick came over and joined in the conversation. Patrick was the same age as Joe, another kid from the suburbs of Chicago, whose past musical experience was limited to playing drums in his high school punk band Public Display of Infection. A self-confessed music geek who was neurotically shy and even now hates the spotlight. He had never sung or played guitar in public before, but nevertheless agreed to audition for the new band Joe told him he was putting together with his pal Pete Wentz. Pete and Patrick first met at Pete's house for the audition session when Patrick sang the song Through Being Cool by emo band Saves the Day. He got the job. Patrick's soulful, edgily melodic vocals added another dimension to the group's sound, and as an extra guitar player, he added weight and drive to the songs. At one point, another friend of Pete and Joe's, Chris Messer, nearly joined on second guitar when his band Show Off broke up. This would have left Patrick free to concentrate on vocals, but in the end he decided that he preferred singing and playing the guitar at the same time, and so Chris amicably went his own way. The logical next step was to play live, although again it was all just for fun, and not part of any great attempt to make it big. The band had neither a name nor a full-time drummer, although the former issue at least was soon resolved. As is now legendary, Fall Out Boy got their name after asking the audience at their second ever gig what they should be called. Some wag in the college crowd shouted, "Fall Out Boy!" At the time, the band were unaware that this was the name of a relatively obscure supporting character in the animated TV series The Simpsons. In fact, Fall Out Boy belongs to a cartoon within a cartoon, being the sidekick of a Homer-like superhero, Radioactive Man, who in the series is Bart's favourite comic book character. It's worth noting, however, that the adventures of Radioactive Man and Fall Out Boy have taken on a life of their own in the actual comic books inspired by the TV show, and also that the Fall Out Boy character bears a striking resemblance to Bart's school friend Milhouse. And now, to this already tangled and complicated postmodern web of parody, homage, spin-offs and multiple realities, we can add the name of a chart-topping punk rock band, just to further confuse everybody, you understand. To avoid copyright problems, however, the band arranged their name as 3 separate words, Fall Out Boy, as opposed to Fall Out Boy, the 2-word cartoon character. With a name and a string of local shows under their belt, Fall Out Boy seemed to be on a roll. They were attracting quite a bit of attention on the Chicago scene, when more and more people were coming to their gigs, enjoying the chance to have fun and let their hair down, as well as the opportunity to witness 4 such consummate performers in full flow, with an undeniable musical chemistry operating between them. The band themselves couldn't help but recognise this, and knew that Fall Out Boy had tapped into something too good to remain a mere jokey side project. Accordingly, they set about recording a 3-song demo CD and sent it off to every record company they could think of. Expecting nothing, Fall Out Boy were astonished to receive quite a lot of interest in what they had to offer. They got several offers from both small labels and major players in the music business, but after enjoying a number of free lunches at the expense of large record companies, they eventually decided to sign with the fledgling indie label Fueled by Ramen. But why go with this unknown, underfunded company when they could have been snapped up by one of the big boys straight away? According to Pete Wentz, Fall Out Boy signed to Fueled by Ramen precisely because they felt it was a long shot, and also because the label seemed sympathetic to their aims and ambitions. They were happy for Fall Out Boy to grow and develop at their own pace, in their own time, whereas another label with more clout might have forced them to fit into an already established mould of how they expected them to be. The label might not have had much money, but they let Fall Out Boy keep their freedom, which was infinitely more important. Now they had a deal, they needed a full-time drummer. Despite being Pete's oldest friend, Andy Hurley didn't join Fall Out Boy until just before the recording of their debut album, by which time they'd already had 2 releases under their belt. The first was actually a split CD with Hurley's band Project Rocket, while the other was a mini-album on the California-based independent label Uprising Records. Released in February 2003, Fall Out Boy's Evening Out With Your Girlfriend fitted 9 songs into roughly half an hour and was released in a limited edition run some 3 months before their debut album proper. The track listing included Calm Before the Storm, which they later re-recorded on Take This to Your Grave, and such classic Fall Out Boy titles as The World's Not Waiting for 5 Tired Boys in a Broken Down Van, and Parker Lewis Can't Lose, but I'm Gonna Give It My Best Shot. Uprising Records would reissue the Evening Out With Your Girlfriend mini-album several times over the next couple of years as the band's popularity grew beyond anyone's expectations.
I've known
Baby.
Pete for like 8 years.
Baby Andy.
We did hardcore bands together, so they eventually needed a drummer for a tour. I was like going to school full time in Milwaukee, and I think, I was just super busy with other bands, so I wasn't able to be in it right away.
Yeah,
Most girls
other
and
band.
guys, consider me, they want me in their life, so I'm used to that.
On their debut album, Fall Out Boy presented 12 songs that defined their sound to the world and established them as the standard bearers for a new generation of post-emo punk pop. Recorded with producer and friend Sean O'Keefe and released on May 6, 2003, Take This to Your Grave featured stuttering punk guitars and needle-sharp riffs that recalled late 70s new wave power pop and 80s hair metal in almost equal amounts, wrapped around frenzied hardcore drumming. Pete's darkly sardonic lyrics seemed as though they were torn directly from a particularly intense teenage diary, creating instant empathy between the band and their fans. Patrick's vocals are also particularly distinctive, a high nasal whine that on the choruses almost seems to be aping the multi-octave emoting of contemporary soul and R&B singers, while Pete's backing vocals come in the form of a muted death metal roar, meaning that you can sing or shout along to each number, depending on your preference. Tell That Mick He Just Made My List of Things to Do Today finds Pete, through Patrick, fantasising about the death of a former lover, or just the object of his obsession, purely so that he can finally get over her, to the pulse of raging, skyscraping guitars. The album's 3 singles follow in quick succession. Dead on Arrival is a taut, tight new wave anthem about unrequited love, while Grand Theft Autumn, Where Is Your Boy, opens with a half-spoken introduction before the drums and guitars kick in, mid-paced and stuttering with repressed rage and desire. Saturday, opening with the careless resignation of the line, I'm good to go and I'm going nowhere fast, also yearns for something golden, a line that could refer both to the novel The Catcher in the Rye and the book and the film The Outsiders, both major acknowledged influences on Pete's writing. Homesick at Space Camp also contains a reference to being golden, in a love song full of lines about travel, distance, times and places lost but never forgotten. Sending Postcards from a Plane Crash, Wish You Were Here, meanwhile contains the line, My insides are copper and I'd kill to make them gold. Chicago Is So 2 Years Ago features a guest appearance from Justin of the band Motion City Soundtrack, and is another spiteful anthem wishing death and injury on a former lover as payback for their betrayal. But The Pros and Cons of Breathing admits that songwriting is a form of therapy in which the writer can express all his anguish, resentments and violent feelings instead of acting them out. Patrick, or Pete, also confesses that he can never hate the object of his venom as much as he hates himself. Grenade Jumper, featuring Jeff Warren of the band Knockout, is a shout-out to the Chicago punk scene for supporting Fall Out Boy since their inception, a celebration of the club shows put on by the kids for the kids, at which band members participated both as performers and audience members. But there's a tone of bittersweet regret to the song, as the band know that even as they celebrate the scene, they'll soon be too big to be playing those shows anymore. Calm Before the Storm is a powerful song about how it feels when your ex takes up with someone else and you can't help imagining the two of them together. Reinventing the Wheel to Run Myself Over is a breakneck rant full of self-pity and undirected anger and frustration, while finally the patron saint of liars and fakes has the scream-along chorus, "When it all goes to hell, will you be able to tell me sorry with a straight face?" and provides the album with its title in its final line, "Take this to your grave and I'll take it to mine." It's not hard to see why Take This to Your Grave sold over 200,000 copies in the US, despite being released on a tiny independent label. Lyrically, it expresses perfectly the intense emotions of kids in their mid-teens, racked by hormones and desires they're unable to fulfill, feeling everything more powerfully than they ever will again, and completely aware of this fact. The band's knowledge of such classic teen reads as The Catcher in the Rye and the works of author S.E. Hinton is obvious in the way they capture exactly what it feels like to be 15, heartbroken, confused, lonely, isolated among your peers, and raging uselessly against all the hypocrisies and injustices of a corrupt adult society. These aren't lyrics much given over to calm contemplation, understanding or forgiveness. They're confused, bitter, spiteful, direct and powerful, self-pitying and solipsistic, full of narcissism and self-loathing, revolutionary ire and apathetic defeatism. That they're all sung in such a way as to be all but impenetrable to outsiders, while still perfect for those in the know to sing along to, only adds to their appeal. When you're 15, everything matters, everything is forever, and love and pain are equally overpowering. Fall Out Boy remember this. In fact, they give the impression that they've never grown out of it and never want to. There's a famous line in the John Hughes movie, The Breakfast Club, that runs, "When you grow up, your heart dies." On the evidence of this collection, it's a motto that Fall Out Boy have tattooed across their souls.
I don't know. Patrick should probably talk about our real musical influences, but I think that in general that Chicago, when you think about like jazz or whatever you think about Chicago, I don't think that that probably particularly pertains to Fall Out Boy. But the cool thing about being from the Midwest is that you don't really get a lot of attention from the music industry, and so I think a lot of bands that are from LA and New York have A&R guys at their first show, and you kind of start believing your own hype, whereas when you're in the Midwest you can marinate for a little bit longer, and I think it allows bands from Chicago to have kind of a unique sound.
2003 was a year of rapid ascent for Fall Out Boy. 12 months during which the reception they were starting to receive far outstripped the expectations of the group's founders. In those 365 days, they played over 280 shows, touring with the likes of Less Than Jake, Rufio, All American Rejects and Yellowcard amongst others. They travelled the length and breadth of the country, crammed with all their equipment into a clapped-out old van that was only running on 3 cylinders. This meant that they had to keep the heating on full blast in order to keep the engine running, so the band was sweltering and roasting to death through the hot summer months. And when it rained, they all got soaked, as the heating had melted the plastic moulding all around the van's windows. It wasn't easy or glamorous, but it was an approach that was strictly in keeping with the hardcore ethos of building up a following by word-of-mouth buzz and constant touring. Fall Out Boy played everywhere, taking their show to all the small towns typically left off the touring schedules, cooked up by major label bands and corporate booking agencies. But they were equally at home, playing to the relatively sophisticated punk rock audiences of New York and LA, as they were to a room full of kids who'd never had the chance to see a touring band before, And if anything, it was these latter crowds that Fall Out Boy identified with more and who really took the band to their hearts. The Fall Out Boy touring philosophy is simple. Win everybody over, one fan at a time, and do it by being yourself and playing the music that matters to you. This means no shortcuts or compromises to get your video on MTV or your songs used on an advert or in a TV show. Instead, Fall Out Boy went out and played in small clubs where everyone could see them, preferably at all ages shows where everybody could get in. Then they spent hours after the gig meeting the audience at the merchandising stand or out back at the stage door. Not as rock star and fan, offering an autograph and a few condescending words, a snapshot on your phone, but as one kid to another, all part of the same scene. The implicit message was, you can do this too, we're not so different. A Fall Out Boy show was uplifting, empowering and inspirational, and the band were repaid with a fierce loyalty that was soon spreading like wildfire. Fall Out Boy Live is a powerful, uplifting but draining experience. Andy hammers his drums like a madman while screaming along inaudibly, sweat running down his face and chest. Joe is off on one side of the stage, spinning around like a whirling dervish, destroying anything that comes into his path and thrashing at his guitar despite blood pouring from his fingers. Across from him, Pete spends half his time chatting, joking with the audience and introducing the songs, and the other half stage diving into the crowd. Somehow he manages to play bass and roar out his distinctive backing vocals as well. Only Patrick stays still, frozen like a rabbit caught in headlights, or the calm at the eye of the hurricane, singing every word with complete commitment and sincerity, pounding his foot and his guitar, completely focused on his job and on the audience in front of him. A band that writes checks that its live show can't cash is never going to get anywhere, Pete told All Ages zine. We're never going to sound like our CD on stage, so we thrash and have a good time, put on a show. Playing live is where it really all comes together for Fall Out Boy, where the music really matters. It's when they get to meet their fans, some of whom have travelled hundreds of miles to see them, and the band recognise familiar faces in the crowd at every show. It was when Fall Out Boy headlined the 2003 Radio Takeover Back to School tour that they almost reluctantly had to admit that the band was turning into something special. People were coming to the shows just to see them, waiting for hours to claim their places down the front, and singing along to all the tracks from the band's just-released debut album. MTV and Fuse gave much-needed exposure for the videos to Grand Theft Autumn and Saturday, and when the channel broadcaster You Heard It Here First documentary special on the band at the end of the year, it only confirmed what those in the know already had realised. Fall Out Boy were a band to be reckoned with, teetering on the verge of something huge.
As far as musical influences, I think we all come from four very different backgrounds, but where we meet up has a lot to do with Fall Out Boy, and we meet up at like Lifetime and the Descendants and Green Day and Gorilla Biscuits and Quicksand, Refused. But I think there's other stuff. You know, I mean, we listen to metal, we listen to hip hop, we listen to R&B, we listen to jazz, we listen to Britpop, we listen to new stuff that's coming out from younger bands or whatever. So I think it that's what makes Fall Out Boy, I guess.
2004 began with a grueling 3-month tour of Europe and America alongside Mest, before Fall Out Boy played a series of major arena shows supporting Blink-182. They then headlined their own Believers Never Die US tour, before joining the annual Warped Band's touring punk rock cavalcade over the latter half of the summer. This was an opportunity to meet some of their heroes and to enjoy the camaraderie and fun of being part of a touring band of players, alongside bigger groups who would often be watching from the side of the stage as Fall Out Boy played, ready to pay their respects after their set. The band's nerves soon evaporated as they were accepted as equals by the more established acts, many of whom the members of Fall Out Boy had grown up listening to. By this time, it was obvious that Fall Out Boy had outgrown Fueled by Ramen and needed the resources of a bigger company if they were going to push on to the next level and achieve their full potential. Despite their loyalty towards Fueled by Ramen and their gratitude for everything the company had done for them, the unexpected success of Take This to Your Grave had left Fall Out Boy no choice but to sign to a major if they were going to follow it up properly. There's no doubt, for instance, that if Take This to Your Grave had been released on a major with a full promotional budget and a worldwide distribution network, it would have sold many more copies than it actually did. On the other hand, Fall Out Boy now felt they were part of the Fueled by Ramen family and didn't want to desert the label when success came knocking. In the end, a compromise was reached. Fall Out Boy's records would be licensed to Ireland Def Jam for global distribution, and the band would gain all the benefits of being on a major label, but they would also keep the freedom of staying with Fueled by Ramen. Fall Out Boy released one more recording as an indie group, the My Heart Will Always Be the B-Side to My Tongue EP-DVD package in May 2004. The EP featured 5 acoustic tracks, recorded over 2 days with Sean O'Keefe, who had produced Take This to Your Grave. The DVD, meanwhile, told the story of the band so far, with live footage dating back to their first ever show, plus the videos for their singles and numerous extras and scenes of on-tour mayhem. The acoustic songs included stripped-down versions of Grand Theft Autumn, Where Is Your Boy, from Take This to Your Grave, and Nobody Puts Baby in the Corner, which would later appear in full electric form on From Under the Cork Tree. Alongside these were 2 new tracks, My Heart Is the Worst Kind of Weapon and It's Not the Side Effects of the Cocaine, I'm Thinking That It Must Be Love, which takes its wordy title from the lyrics to the 1975 David Bowie song Station to Station. A cover of the classic Joy Division song Love Will Tear Us Apart completed the set. My Heart Will Always Be the B-Side to My Tongue also acted as a stopgap for Fall Out Boy, as the band intended to take some time out before recording their major label debut, and so were aware that their fans would have a fair time to wait before they got to hear their second album. Not that they intended to spend the intervening period relaxing and taking it easy, far from it. Instead, they busied themselves experimenting with different sounds and musical textures, writing, rehearsing and jamming, in order to make sure that their next album wasn't simply Take This to Your Grave Part 2. We could easily have regurgitated our last record, which is what certain people expected us to do, Pete claimed. But when it's all over, we want to be remembered as a rock band that pushed limits and was sincere and totally honest to itself and its fans. When we're 90 years old and on our deathbeds, it will matter to us that we at least took chances. Determined to progress and move forward, Fall Out Boy made sure that the writing of their second album was a more collaborative process than it was on their first. Although Pete still wrote the bulk of the words and Patrick contributed most of the music, songs were restructured and rearranged by the whole band in the rehearsal room. In addition, Pete came up with the lyrics first, and Patrick then set them to music, whereas the songs on Take This to Your Grave had largely been written the other way around. In the end, the band had 25 songs, which were whittled down to a final selection of 12 for the album, which was eventually titled From Under the Cork Tree. The name comes from Pete Wentz's favourite children's book, The Story of Ferdinand by Munro Leaf. The book tells the tale of a giant bull who refuses to go into the ring with a bullfighter but sits under a cork tree and smells the flowers instead. He thought it conveyed an important message about not conforming and following your own path. But the phonetic phrase spelt out by the album's initials was a welcome extra bit of subversion as well. Recorded with Yellowcard and New Found Glory producer Neil Arvon, From Under the Cork Tree turned out to be a far more diverse album than its predecessor, and one that looked set to catapult Fall Out Boy directly into the major league.
I watch stuff like that on TV, it doesn't like. I just don't think it's real. I still feel like I'm watching TV. You know, I watch it and I'm like, that's me, but I'm just watching TV. It was just only weird when I was there. I mean, I usually don't end up seeing even like anything that we do on TV because I don't even have cable. So.
Our lawyer made us change the name of this song so he wouldn't get sued, begins From Under the Cork Tree, with the sound of a mass of clicking cameras and popping flashes, an ironic reference to the media attention that now surrounded the band. But then those familiar raging guitars kick in, and rest assured, it's business as usual. Or is it? The lyrics are a cynical commentary on the way the band have been packaged and presented to a mass audience, or maybe the way that some bands seem to exploit the more superficial aspects of punk culture. We're only liars, but we're the best, Patrick sings. We're only good for the latest trend. He goes on to suggest that some punk or emo bands exploit their fans' feelings of pain and insecurity and then abandon them as soon as they've achieved the fame and fortune they were after all along. Of All the Gin Joints in All the World begins with staccato new wave uh-ohs and clashing guitars before hitting a yearning anthemic chorus. Through it all is a desperate desire to connect, to communicate, to break down the walls of shyness, ego and social conformity that forever keep us apart. Dance Dance builds up from a tense, Cure-like beginning, all throbbing bass and muted guitar harmonics, towards a charging, pop-hardcore chorus with Patrick singing the title in a high, urgent falsetto. Sugar We're Going Down is mid-paced and perfectly radio-friendly, with a bridge that almost recalls 80s synth veterans' Tears for Fears. It was a deserved hit when released as a single, despite having a typically twisted lyric about sexual jealousy, voyeurism, revenge and masturbation. Nobody Puts Baby in the Corner is, if anything, even more commercial, sounding like a 21st century punk take on some new classic wave pop act like Squeeze. I've Got a Dark Alley and a Bad Idea That Says You Should Shut Your Mouth, Summer Song, is a reflective interlude, although Andy's drumming is as heavy as ever. An almost unbearably naked song about failure, depression and insecurity, it's full of lines about self-doubt even in the face of the band's success. We can fake it for the airwaves, force our smiles, baby, half dead from comparing myself to everyone else around me. 7 Minutes in Heaven, out of Van Halen, picks up the pace musically, even if the lyrics are still full of self-loathing and frustration. It's pop metal for loners, with explicit references to clinical depression and suicide. I'm having another episode. I just need a stronger dose. I keep telling myself I'm not the desperate type. Sophomore Slump, or Comeback of the Year, finds the band questioning their own sincerity again, with each line seemingly contradicting the other. Are we growing up or just going down, it asks. It's just a matter of time before we're all found out. Champagne for My Real Friends, Real Pain for My Sham Friends has a great wailing riff and more lyrics about Fall Out Boy's struggle to stay true to their punk principles. We only do it for the scars and stories, not the fame, they sing. But somehow they still come away feeling used and dirty. It's a sentiment repeated in I Slept With Someone in Fall Out Boy and all I got was this stupid song written about me. Although here the focus is more on the tensions in personal relationships than between art and career. It's the first song from Under the Cork Tree to feature Pete's hardcore backing vocals, used to such strong effect on almost every song on Take This to Your Grave. A Little Less 16 Candles, A Little More Touch Me is a classic Fall Out Boy messed up, unrequited love song. The title contrasts the virginal innocence of the John Hughes directed, Molly Ringwald starring teen movie 16 Candles, with the raunchy, high-energy pop song Touch Me by British topless model turned singer Samantha Fox. Pete Wentz's obsession with John Hughes movies and his interest in Sam Fox dates back to the same time, the late 1980s, when Circus magazine would carry small ads for sexy, semi-nude photos of the well-endowed star in its back pages. Pete's mum would never let him send away for the poster, so he cut out the ad and carried that around with him instead, Samantha Fox becoming literally his first sex symbol. Get Busy Living or Get Busy Dying, Do Your Part to Save the Scene and Stop Going to Shows is a powerful anti-love song, shot through with bile and bitterness that ends in an unaccompanied spat-out snatch of poetry. This takes us straight into the not-so-hidden extra track, XO, which concludes the album on a soulful coda of lighter waving proportions. From Under the Cork Tree is certainly a massive step forward from Take This to Your Grave. For all its strengths, that record proved somewhat one-dimensional after repeated listens, something the band became well aware of after playing the songs live every night for nigh on 2 years. Their second album incorporates a much wider palette of influences and is sonically more adventurous, without sacrificing the powerful directness and catchy pop hooks that have become Fall Out Boy's trademarks. Lyrically, it's packed with startling original images, while focusing relentlessly on the band's own doubts, fears and insecurities concerning success and the perils of selling out. Time and again they accuse themselves of faking it, of exploiting the kids and of not being good enough. There are constant references to depression and self-loathing. Even the rare moments of affirmation and righteous anger are laced with a scathing, self-wounding bitterness and cynicism. The paradox is that such honesty immediately disproves the accusations they level at themselves. But it doesn't stop the listener worrying about the mental health of a band that have made such an incredible album and been so well received, yet seem to regard everything they do as a failure.
We're not in a feud with the Killers. I think things get blown out of proportion all the time. You write about one thing on the internet and then it's just like the .coms refresh on the journal update and kind of freak out. And I think that both probably my band and the rest of the Killers would say about Brandon that we have big mouths and we run them way too much.
Success brings as many pressures and pitfalls as it does opportunities and advantages, especially if you come from a scene where bands live or die by their principles. Determined not to sell out, Fall Out Boy were forced to carefully consider their every move as they grew bigger and more popular, wrestling with their consciences over career moves that other bands would have taken without a second thought. Sometimes they gained more publicity for the things they didn't do than the things they did. One example was when the band turned down the opportunity to have a song of theirs used on an international TV advertising campaign. This would have brought them an unheard of level of exposure at a stroke, reaching households that would never normally have considered listening to Fall Out Boy. Plus, there would doubtless have been a not inconsiderable fee. But the band turned it down anyway. For a while, this was all the media wanted to ask them about. They became the band that turned down the lucrative advertising contract. It seemed that in this day and age, such principled, uncareer-minded behaviour was unheard of. Were they mad? Did they not realise what a great opportunity this was? Didn't they want to sell records? In response, Fall Out Boy just shrugged and pointed to some of the other bands in the past that had become well known through advertising campaigns, such as Stiltskin or Babylon Zoo. Never heard of them? Well, exactly. Both bands were one-hit wonders, with the public snapping up the track used on the ad, then quickly losing interest. A shame, as both bands actually had much more to offer, but both were pigeonholed as just that band from the advert. Fall Out Boy had no desire to fall into the same trap, and besides, they didn't really need the exposure. They were already selling records. And better that people hear their songs on the radio for the first time and understand that they mean what they're saying and that the band stand for something, than hear it on an advert and just associate it in their minds for all time with selling a product. This was just the most well-publicised example of the band's struggles with success, though. The lyrics to From Under the Cork Tree are full of references to selling out, going through the motions, exploiting the fans, feeling distanced from everyone around them and feeling like a fake. Even the album's title suggests a desire to just opt out of the game and sit in the shade, taking it easy. Yet it's hard to reconcile these feelings with lyricist Pete Wentz's business-minded philosophy. The way he seems determined to exploit the Fall Out Boy brand to its full potential, and his desire to see it become an all-encompassing way of life for its fans. Sometimes, the way he talks about Fall Out Boy, it seems more as if he's discussing a modern multinational business empire than a punk rock group, talking in terms of unlimited expansion and domination of the marketplace. But this is the same man who worries constantly about the impact his songs have on their fans, about how they're perceived, and who bears his soul to the world on an almost daily basis. It's clear from his writings and his comments in interviews that Pete is well aware of these contradictions, and it's also apparent that on occasions they get the better of his already fragile mental state. Before starting Fall Out Boy, Pete was described as borderline suicidal, and actually overdosed on the anti-anxiety drug Xanax during the recording of Take This to Your Grave. He still takes the pills and another prescription drug, Ambien, to help him get to sleep at night. Then, in February 2005, he overdosed on the antidepressant Ativan while sitting in a car in the parking lot of a Best Buy store in Chicago. He was hospitalised for a week, during which time Fall Out Boy were forced to tour the UK with a stand-in bass player. Pete refuses to call this incident a suicide attempt, but admits that he doesn't have any other name for it. I was isolating myself further and further, and the more I isolated myself, the more isolated I'd feel, he told Rolling Stone magazine. I just wanted my head to shut off, like I just wanted to completely stop thinking about anything at all. I felt like I was being Pete Wentz for everybody else, and I didn't have Pete Wentz to talk to. Despite, by all accounts, being a popular, successful student at high school, Pete constantly seems to refer back to the notion of being a kid that doesn't fit in. His favourite book is J.D. Salinger's teen classic The Catcher in the Rye, in which the confused, messed-up hero Holden Caulfield angrily rejects all the hypocrisies of adult society in post-war America, as well as the phony culture of his peers. He has signed himself in his online journals as Peter Pan, the boy who never grew up, and also seems obsessed with writer-director John Hughes' sequence of troubled teen movies made in the 1980s, like Pretty in Pink, The Breakfast Club and 16 Candles. The John Hughes movies were all set and filmed in the Chicago suburb of Shelmerville, close to where Pete grew up, and this and the subject matter of the films, generally to do with the pressures and problems of not fitting in at high school, have made them a perennial influence on his lyrics for Fall Out Boy. Most obviously influenced are the track Pretty in Punk from Fall Out Boy's Evening Out with Your Girlfriend mini-album, and A Little Less 16 Candles, A Little More Touch Me on From Under the Cork Tree. 16 Candles also inspired the hugely popular video for Dance Dance, which undoubtedly went some way towards making that song a hit. Whatever it is Pete gets from these films, it seems he's not the only one.
The only thing that's changed is what goes on around Fall Out Boy. I feel like since we've been considered, breakthrough or whatever, since people have been calling you the next big thing, I read on the internet and lots of times people will kind of idolize us or make us out to be these saviors of pop punk or whatever this is, and other times they kind of vilify us and demonize us as the people who are ruining everything. And then you kind of meet us at a show and you realize that we're probably four of the most ordinary people you'll ever meet in a really extraordinary situation. So, I don't know, come meet us at a show.
Although their records are now released internationally through Island Records, Fall Out Boy are still part of the Fueled by Ramen family. Look closely at the sleeve of their major label debut, From Under the Cork Tree, and you'll see the logo of the small indie label prominently displayed just below a bat-shaped design and the word Decadence. So what is Decadence? The answer is that it's a label within a label. A company started by Pete Wentz alongside John from Fueled by Ramen in order to establish an artist-friendly home for some great bands that they thought were being overlooked and were struggling to get a deal. Decadence signings so far include Gym Class Heroes, October Fall, The Hush Sound, whose second album is being produced by Patrick Stump, and Panic at the Disco, who so far seem the Decadence band most likely to achieve global stardom, after Fall Out Boy of course. While the other acts on Decadence all more or less follow the same emo pop-punk blueprint as Fall Out Boy, Panic at the Disco mix synths, drum machines and even accordion into their sound, and seems set to follow the likes of fellow Las Vegas natives, The Killers, into the college rock charts and hip indie rock and fashion magazines. The teenage group are all Fall Out Boy fans, and when they heard that Pete was setting up a record label, they emailed him at his blog with a link to their website. Pete signed them on the basis of the 2 home-produced tracks they posted there, thinking that every record company in the world must be after them. This wasn't actually the case, and at the time, Panic at the Disco only had 3 songs and never played live due to the dearth of all-ages punk clubs in Vegas. Pete wanted an album from them by the end of the year, but the teenage outfit rose to the challenge, and their debut LP, A Fever You Can't Sweat Out, was released on Decadence to great critical acclaim. Not content with playing in a globe-conquering punk band and running his own record label, Pete has also set up his own clothing imprint, again through Fueled by Ramen. Clandestine Industries mainly sell Fall Out Boy related merchandise through their website, such as t-shirts, hoodies and polo shirts. They've also published Pete's debut novel, The Boy with the Thorn in His Side, an illustrated book based on his childhood nightmares, and, like the band Panic at the Disco, named after a Smiths song. Finally, or maybe not, Pete has also set up his own film production company, Bart Skull Films, whose first release was the 2005 DVD Release the Bats. This surreal collection of short films was essentially all about Pete Wentz and his world, incorporating of course Fall Out Boy and several other Fueled by Ramen and Decadence groups. Friends and band members could be seen both as themselves and playing fantasy characters. A sequel is apparently in the pipeline. With so many different projects on the go, it's a wonder that Pete Wentz has any time to sleep, let alone to pursue his rumoured relationship with Ashlee Simpson. Seriously though, none of these offshoots is something that Pete takes lightly. He puts as much energy and passion into running Clandestine Industries, or bigging up the bands on Decadence and looking for new talent to help out, as he does into writing and performing with Fall Out Boy. Then there's the regular journal he maintains on the Fall Out Boy website, often typing up hundreds of words on his computer, in the hotel room or on the tour bus after a show. Overcast Kids, the official Fall Out Boy fan club, is also something that Pete is personally involved in. He's gone on record as saying that he wants Fall Out Boy to be a whole culture. You're going to eat, sleep and breathe it, he says. I want it to be a way you think about the world. It's an approach more common in hip-hop than in rock. It's commonplace nowadays for rappers to run clothing lines and record labels and nurture protégé acts, but rock bands generally keep out of the business side of things. But as Pete says, bands can't sell records. The new rock stars are dudes like Jay-Z. It's just taking care of business. Or maybe it's just the old hardcore ethic of keeping active, giving something back and contributing to the scene. As the song says, get busy living or get busy dying.
Usually people kind of try to put like a little bit of a leash on us and try to have us play exactly how we play on our record, and we're just not very good at it. We've sat down in a room before and tried to do it before, and it just doesn't happen. So it's more fun to just emote and react to the music and kind of do what Fall Out Boy has just always done.
Fall Out Boy began 2006 with the news that they'd been nominated for Best New Artist at the year's Grammy Awards. They didn't win, but attended the ceremony, and immediately afterwards their website was inundated with messages of consolation and support from their fans. Fall Out Boy attract the most intense and obsessive love from their fans of any band for a long while. Pete Wentz is the thinking girl's pin-up, while the other guys have a geeky, unthreatening charm that appeals to socially insecure teenagers of both genders. Most of all though, fans identify with Fall Out Boy's sincerity. The fact that Fall Out Boys sing and play from their hearts, making music and writing lyrics that avoid the obvious and go instead for a real emotional collection, is something that the kids appreciate. So many bands patronise or talk down to their audience, and while it's true that Fall Out Boy may attract a younger following than many punk-type bands, they always treat the kids with respect and as equals. It's this attitude, more than anything else, which has established the band's popularity, and which hopefully will continue to do so. 2006 found the band touring Europe and the UK, where Sugar We're Going Down was just beginning to repeat its American success. Then back to the States for their first headlining arena tour in the spring, plus a series of smaller secret shows around the country. In between the Morrissey sing-alongs and waffle bat fights on the tour bus, doubtless the band will be writing fresh material for their third album, which should be another giant step forward of the same proportions that Under the Cork Tree advanced from Take This to Your Grave. In addition, Pete has written a sequel to The Boy with a Thorn in His Side, entitled Rainy Day Kids, which is ready for publication, and he's working on another book with William Beckett of the Academy Ears, for which the two friends are writing alternate chapters. Other bands from the Decadence stable, like Gym Class Heroes and Panic at the Disco, also look set to break big imminently, following Fall Out Boy to the top of the charts. Fall Out Boy are finding success on their own terms, and proving that you can make money and build a career in music without selling out your punk principles. The future is all clear.
Thank you for buying Maximum Fall Out Boy. We hope you enjoyed it. Watch out for further titles on Chrome Dreams coming up soon. If you did enjoy it or have any comments or suggestions, write to us at Chrome Dreams, PO Box 230, New Malden, Surrey, UK, KT36YY, or email on mail@chromedreams.co.uk. Details of our full catalogue are listed on our website at www.chromedreams.co.uk. Thanks again for listening, and goodbye for now.